For most of us, memories of first grade include learning to read, write, and maybe still learning how to color inside the lines. We would never imagine having to learn how to kill a roach that is crawling out of our desk or how to avoid stepping on mouse traps placed in the hallways. But this scenario is reality for millions of young children enrolled in inner city and low-income schools across America. My freshman year in high school, my mom removed me from Thornton High School, a low-income high school in Chicago with a 4-year graduation rate just under 40%. Most of my family members and friends weren't so lucky though. And after much research and several interviews, I'm here to educate you on a topic that is significant to cities nationwide and very near to my heart: the quality of inner city education. Today I'm going to explain the conditions of inner city schools, the reasons for these conditions, and the effects it has on the children, their communities, in this country. Let's begin by describing the conditions. When Julie Hageman, a first grade teacher, recalled her very first day teaching at a low-income school in Dayton, Ohio, she described teaching math, how to be responsible, and how to kill roaches that were crawling near the students. This experience is mirrored by many students in low-income schools across the country who enter these schools that have issues ranging from pest infestation and sewage problems to a lack of materials. Often there aren't enough books for each student and they have to share. And many times the books are so old that they're not even useful. Some of them are as old as 10 years old. In addition, these schools often have unqualified teachers that aren't certified in or didn't major in the subject that they're teaching. And according to the Children's Defense Organization, high poverty schools are 77% more likely to have a teacher teaching out of field than classes in low poverty schools. These issues are made worse when added to the overcrowding that usually comes with these schools. In a study conducted by UCLA, it was discovered that some schools in California were enrolling 5 times as many students in schools than the buildings were designed to hold. One school had over 4,200 students in a building that was designed for only 800. When the schools become overcrowded, students are forced to learn in teachers' lounges, libraries, and storage rooms, which have been converted into makeshift classrooms. In Jonathan Kozol's book, Amazing Grace, which is about inner city New York, he speaks of one school in the South Bronx that had class in the stairwell because there was nowhere else to have class. The conditions of low-income schools are harsh, but let's explore how they came to exist. A lack of satisfactory funding is the cause for most schools' inadequacies. This makes it almost impossible for schools to renovate buildings, hire qualified teachers, or purchase much-needed supplies and materials. Low salaries and poor funding discourage well-qualified teachers from coming to teach at these schools, and it only leaves educators that are either new to the profession or couldn't get hired anywhere else. In fact, one school in Oakland, California, opted to hire a series of substitute teachers instead of hiring a permanent one because they couldn't afford it. In an effort to help, the No Child Left Behind Act was imposed in 2001, and it states that in order to receive funding from the government, schools must perform well on a set of standardized tests. In high-poverty schools who are desperate for more funding, they've started teaching to the tests instead of actually teaching the curriculum. This actually contributes to the dropout rate because when they finally get to high school, they're so far behind that they find it easier to give up. Frank Marrero, an inner city teacher of 25 years, recalls a staff meeting in which the educators were specifically told not to hold back students because they'll just bring down the test scores next year. Now that you understand the conditions of low-income schools and the reasons for these conditions, let me explain how children, their communities, and the nation are affected. Julie Hageman, the teacher I mentioned before, said, "You put a child in a school that is dirty and unsanitary. You make them use bathroom facilities without doors and that don't work. You allow roaches and rodents to run through the school unchecked, and then you expect the teachers to instill in them the idea that they're a person of worth. That doesn't make any sense." And one high school student in Oakland, California, said that her school was so dirty that it didn't feel like a school, but more like a prison, and sometimes she felt like dropping out. USA Today reports that 17 of America's 50 largest cities had graduation rates less than 50%. Detroit was the lowest with 25%. High graduation rates are directly correlated to high crime rates, and high school dropouts are 8 times more likely to be incarcerated, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. High school dropouts also tend to raise the crime rates in their own neighborhoods. Many of you might be saying to yourselves, well, that sucks for those kids in their neighborhoods, but what does that have to do with me? In some states, according to a report by the Department of Justice, it costs taxpayers 5 times as much money to house a prisoner than it does to educate a student. And a rising number of inmates or offenders means rising costs for social programs and prisons. Also, the Wall Street Journal reported that reducing the number of dropouts by only 50% would generate $45 billion annually, which would certainly help a country suffering from a recession. It is my hope today that you learned something you didn't know about the quality of education in the inner city. You've learned of the conditions of low-income schools, the reasons for these conditions, and the impact it has on the children, their communities, in this country. I leave you with this quote by novelist Robin Cook. "Education is more than a luxury. It is a responsibility that society owes itself."